Hey, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. Just wanted to do a little piece about Ben Herbert, and I was doing it based on some old information, and I saw today that he's got a new video out where he's interviewing, and I absolutely loved it. Now, Ben's here to work with the guys. He's excited, and he said the team seemed like they're very excited. The main thing that Ben Herbert wants to do is build trust with the team, build trust with certain players. He wants them to know that he's here to do what's in the players' best interest, and he's here to impact the players in the most positive way. Now, I was really excited about this. He's got 3 keys to describe the Chargers training program. He wants to, 1, make the players harder to break. Now, he doesn't mean mentally, he means it literally. Injury prevention. So he explained that he wants to train up the players' necks and their traps to protect the head. He doubled down on this later in the interview. He said history tells him as the neck gets stronger, it decreases the chances of concussion. He also went on to break down the most vulnerable body areas of the body, being the head, of course, the right and left shoulder girdle, the right and left hip girdle, right and left hamstrings, right and left ankles. Says that you have to be proactive in training those areas of the body, and your training has to be sound in those areas. Now, later in the interview, he went on to say that, doing the back squat, while that has a time and place, it does not trump working those areas of the body. Those are the most vulnerable areas of the bodies in the game of football. And if you train those areas, it will help prevent injuries. Now, so number 1, like I said, that was make the player harder to break. But then number 2 is consistency. So this has more to do with your mind than your body. So this is making you harder to break mentally. So it says, consistency is going to be your ability to show up every day and consistently do what you're capable of doing. It's incredibly valuable. The level of attention to detail that you put in. So he explained that, when they were driving, they had to stop and get a shop vac, some magic erasers, and they wanted to make sure that the weight area, the weight room, it's like a 5-star hotel, is a certain level of cleanliness and organization to that area. So when these players, you go to your local gym, people leave the weights on the machines. When they put it back, they don't put it back in a certain way. He wants the weights so I guess they use rogue weights. So he wants the rogue on the very top in the same location for every weight. That level of attention to detail is something that the Chargers have totally lacked. If you're paying that close of a level of attention in the weight room, you'll probably do that on the field. Another piece of consistency is being emotionally stable. So he explained that you'll never see him change no matter what. He doesn't change emotionally. So, he's not going to come in and say, oh, well, Coach Herbert's got it today, but then it rains and then all of a sudden he's downtrodden and dour. That's not going to happen. Not going to allow something that happened to him earlier that day affect how he treats you. He's going to be the same every time you run into him. Number 3, after consistency, are the 3 key performance indicators. So let's see if I can get this right. So there's 3. This is the first: flexibility, mobility, strength, power, agility, and speed. Bigger, faster, stronger. So that's number 1. Number 2 of these key performance indicators is going to be he wants to improve the range of motion in the tissue and joints. And the third, and you know what? there are not 3 here. I actually have 5 written down. He wants to increase the pressing capability of the players. Now, I actually reviewed an older video that he did, so I'll break that down a little bit later. But one other thing, he didn't say this. Besides adding pressing capability, he also wants to improve their pulling capability unless he's changed his mind about that. And he might have. A few things seem to evolve from the older video I watched and this newer video. He also wants to improve the player's acceleration and top end speed. So those are the key performance indicators: flexibility, mobility, strength, power, agility, and speed, bigger, faster, stronger. Improve the range of motion in tissue and joint. Add more pressing capabilities to the players. Improve the player's acceleration and improve the player's top end speed. We had enough of our main man Eckler with his 13 miles per hour. So how'd you come to the conclusions that you came to, Ben? Someone asked, or something similar to that. He said it was through experience. So through experience, he found that you can have a group of players that are very physically capable, but when they get on the field, they're not successful. You can also have a group that's very consistent in how they work, but's not physically powerful, and they're not successful. It's when you mesh the two that you're going to get greater results. And he looks to quantify everything so that you can draw a level of attention to that detail, and that results in improvement. So an example, there's always new technology, and Ben's job is to stay on top of these things. So for example, there's a machine that allows players to measure their hip flexion. So just like a player would know his 40 time, he now knows his neck stats. Now that he knows his neck stats and he can quantify that, he can make improvements to his neck flexion, and that will help him to avoid concussions. And it also shows up in the player's desire and willingness to train that area to a high level. He had a team questionnaire. Now, he said that he had this questionnaire because he wanted to know what the players know about their bodies and their capabilities. In training, if there are things you don't know, you can fall victim to anything. So, for example, you know how, like, you go on YouTube and you look at training and everybody's saying something different. If you don't have the knowledge, you can fall victim to people who don't know what they're talking about. Now, if you do have the knowledge and awareness, you can limit the chances of that happening. Now, the example that I just used might not be accurate because he could just be talking about, hey, if you don't have the stats or the actual, if you're not quantifying what your abilities are, you can actually believe that you're better than you think. You can believe that you're better than you actually are. And once you quantify that, then you can actually work to improve it and be as good as you think you are, or find out what your capabilities are. You know, he wants to rate the person's pressing power, mentioned that earlier, and he wants the team to know things like what their ankle mobility is. So you say you have, you measure the ankle mobility of a player and you rate it from either A, excellent, or D, needs work. He's interested, and this is something that hasn't changed with him from the very beginning. He's interested in lean and fat mass. That hasn't changed. Lean mass up, fat mass down if necessary. He doesn't want the players looking at their playing weight, because if you're hydrated, which is a good thing, you're going to weigh more. And one thing that he was doing way back in the day was using the DEXA scan and the InBody. And these are two things that I'm very familiar with. I was using those as well. And what those do is they measure things like your lean mass and your, as accurate as possible, your fat mass. And it can measure, and they also have like a full body 3D image of you, right? So this can show you, it shows the changes in your body. It also shows your how much fat you've lost in a month or however long you go between scans. So so in my case, how much fat I've lost in a month and how much muscle I'll put on. Now this is not something he talked about in the Chargers press conference, but he talked about how important nutrition is. And I'll get to that at the end or after I get done with this first part. And I was doing the same thing that he was talking about. And I had a nutritionist, even though I kind of came up with my own plan based on things that I don't even know where I got the information, but I put together a little plan. And I was able to lose 7 pounds of fat and put on 4 pounds of muscle in a month, doing basically what Ben Herbert said that he would have his college players do. And so like that actually rang a alarm bell. This guy really knows what he's talking about, because I saw, and I'm older, I'm like almost 50. And I actually was able to put on 4 pounds of muscle and lose 7 pounds of fat in a month. And I was working out a lot and everything, but I'm old. These younger players, these really gifted athletic players, I do have like an athletic build and everything, but I'm old. If he applies the same thing that I did to these Chargers players, the changes that they're going to make to their body is going to be insane. If an old guy like me can do it. So back to what we were talking about. So lean mass up, fat mass down if necessary. And he wants to find out what they know and what they think they know. If it matches up, great. If not, then the strength and conditioning team is going to fill in those areas. And he's going to build that trust so that the players know that if they give their time and their energy to the strength and conditioning team, it's going to help those players do their job better. And, with the help of the strength and conditioning team, they're going to build the rapport and the foundation. So they're going to build on the knowledge that's either present or it's not present. So if they have capabilities that are high, they want to maintain that. If the capabilities are low, they might not have even known that because they might not have been able to quantify it before. But if those capabilities are low, now they're going to have the capability to increase that level. And, I'm very excited to see that. Now, somebody asked him about Jim Harbaugh, and I'll sum it up like this. Ben basically said that, he made him feel like who's got it better than me, the way that Jim put it. He said it took him 30 seconds to talk to Jim about taking the Chargers job, and it took him and his wife 5 to 7 minutes to decide to take the Chargers job. It was a no-brainer. The coach has built trust and rapport with Ben Herbert, and, he basically trusts the coach. He was right on his way. And he said that building a team and coaching them the right way is important to both him and Jim. And he and Jim are both willing to sacrifice and make the best version of the team they can, the same wavelength. They both have a level of urgency and commitment, and it matches each other. Now, he also said that from what he was able to gather from the team, he won't speculate what was going on before, but they also seem to have an urgency and they're willing to embrace whatever the coaches are putting down. He also mentioned something called TED, there every day. So he said the coach is always there, so it's up to Coach Herbert to match that intensity. He's always going to be there, just like Jim's always going to be there. And the very last thing that I wanted to go over in that press conference, he said, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. This is something that I always live by myself. I don't care what someone says. What do you do? And he said when he shows the players something, he wants them to feel it. So when they get results, it builds trust. There's no redos when it comes to building trust. If he's not certain about something, he won't say anything, nothing. Because there's no redos when it comes to building trust. If you tell somebody something that's not true, the trust, it's going to be shaken. So he won't say anything if he doesn't know something. And then he says, once that relationship is built, whether the player wants to hear it or not, Ben could basically say, when have I told you something that you cannot believe in? The answer is going to be never. Now, let me kind of go back and we'll take a look at Ben Herbert's roots. So this is years ago. Let me see if I can figure out when this was, actually, because I did not make a note of that. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. Where is it? I found the video. It is from 8 years ago. Okay, so this video is from 8 years ago. Let me see if I can close that. So I'm going to skip some of the stuff that I made a note of, but so this is him 8 years ago, so some of this stuff could have changed. He said that when it comes to building up, and these are college athletes, when it comes to building a player up, it's a total process. If one thing is missing, guys cannot reach their potential. says each player has a different genetic predisposition. So going back in history, there was a player. This guy was an awesome player for the Chargers, but the Chargers basically tried to treat him like he was anybody else. His name was Tonu Fonoti. See if I can look him up. I know I misspelled his name. Actually, I didn't misspell his name. But he was a guard for the Chargers, somebody they drafted, I think, in the second round or something to that effect. And yeah, they drafted him in the second round, number 39 overall. And this guy was awesome for the Chargers. He just absolutely dominated. They call it the Phono T factor. Rich Eisen on the NFL Network. They basically, this guy would gain this weight. They tried to have this guy eat and train like he was a normal dude, but he's Samoan. Things are different. So one of the things I like to see with Ben Herbert is he realizes that everyone has a different genetic predisposition. So he's not going to have every guy treated exactly the same way because every guy's not going to respond the same way. Now, he said that it takes 4 to 7 years in the league before the guy becomes who he's capable of being in the league. So, you know, a lot of these young players have a chance to grow underneath this guy, Ben Herbert, and I just can't wait to see it. So that's why I'm always saying, you're not always hearing me say it, but I'm always saying it's going to take 2 or 3 years, maybe up to 3 years before this team starts to reach its full potential. Now, it's not just training. Training's a piece of the puzzle, but I'm actually skipping ahead. So let me, I have that in the wrong order. Let me change the order of that. And at the Arkansas Razorbacks, I think it's the Arkansas Razorback, they have a saying, or they had a saying going into the training room. You can either have the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. If you don't have the discipline to do what the training staff asks you, you can't reach your potential. And the better the guys get, the more the training staff has to refine the process. And the risk of injury increases when things are done improperly. So let me actually see if I can jump to that real quick. One thing that he stresses, and I know that this hasn't changed with them, I know this is the same. He basically says that the quality of the movement is the most important thing. So if you're adding on too much weight to your training and just, trying to ego lift, you're not really building yourself into a better football player. It's your time under tension, different variations of an exercise to equalize muscle strength, and no lifting weights that are too heavy for you to properly do the exercise because that hinders your strength increase and it increases your injury risk. So this is the foundation he comes from. It says increasing weight only hinders development. Chasing numbers is a lot of wasted time. Doing it right will make the player better, stronger, and also reduce the risk of injury. Ego lifts are out. And he, one thing that I noticed, I don't think he said this, but one thing I noticed, he seems to understand, and of course he understands this, is that he understands whether or not an exercise puts extra unnecessary stress on the joints. And it also, he sees how mobility affects the athlete's ability to lift. So it sounds like over the years he's refined this because he was talking about squats in this video. And now he's saying that squats aren't anywhere near as important as taking care of those, the most vulnerable parts of a body in the game of football. So he's actually evolved since then. And another thing he didn't talk about in the Chargers videos, he also he's looking to fix any weakness in the stabilizer muscles. And I mentioned this earlier. He had said in this older video that 99% of the imbalances a player can say he can bench press 225 times, or he can bench press 225 pounds 14 times, but he can only pull 225 4 times. So he wants to make sure that gets equalized. So it doesn't sound like he still believes in that, but I would believe that he probably does still believe in that. But there's no way for me to prove that because he didn't say anything about it. Another thing, and this is evident, he's constantly researching. This is something he said in that older video. Now, back to, we're still on the quality of movement, it looks like. And I was taking so many notes, I had to split this up, and I might have split it up wrong, but it's the quality of the movement. Load takes care of itself. Quality of movement, quality of movement, quality of movement, not the amount of weight. No ego lifts. So this is something that he's seemed to build on. So he basically was saying, he didn't say this in the video, but I kind of inferred that he doesn't want any complicated lifts like, say, for example, the front squat, because there's too many people that can't do it due to mobility issues. For example, like I'm about 6 feet tall, but I have a huge reach. So if I put my hands back to do a front squat, if I put my elbows where everyone else puts their elbows, my hands are behind my head. I can't do a front squat unless I have my elbows all the way down by my side, and that's completely improper. So if I was a football player if there's a football player with my measurables on the team, I'd have problems with wrist mobility, maybe ankle mobility, elbow mobility. It's too complicated. Keep it simple. Don't frustrate these players. For example, he was talking about he doesn't have the players do cleans. Cleans are an Olympic lift for a reason. It takes a lot of technical skill to do those. And like someone like me, I would have a nightmare time trying to do a clean because I can't keep my hands from going behind my head if my elbows are out. So basically, if I'm trying to do a clean with any sort of weight whatsoever, the quality of that exercise is going to plummet. And there's no way Ben Herbert's going to have a player like me doing that exercise if I can't do it properly. So another thing that they want to make sure that they measure, at least back 8 years ago, and I think this is the same, but they've refined it. They want to measure things like strength and their ability to produce force from that strength. So I don't know if they're still doing this, but I bet they are. So they'll practice 3 different things when it comes to lifting. So bar speed, so how fast can you explode? What is your maximum 1 rep max? What is your 1 rep max? And how many repetitions can you do with the weight? Goes on to say that you're only as strong as your weakest link. So he wants to be strong in all 3 of those aspects. If you can't convert strength into speed and power, you probably can't play the game. It's usually the total package of what a player could do across the board, speed, max strength, and endurance, that is going to translate to the football field. So, I mean, if you're really strong, but you have no endurance or you have no speed, you're probably not going to do well. If you're fast, but you have no strength, no endurance, you're not going to do well. If you have a lot of endurance, no strength, no speed, not going to do well. It's a total package of those 3 things. He's seen guys that are awesome from a training standpoint, but they can't follow directions, so they don't play. So it's not just the physical aspect, but it's also the mental. If you can't follow the directions of your coach, they're not putting you out there. So one thing he tells his athletes that if you follow my directions, you're more likely to follow the position coach's directions. And he stated earlier in this lecture that if you follow your coach's directions, you're more likely to be successful. Now, it kind of alarmed me because a lot of these players could not follow Brandon Staley's directions. Now, they were complicated, but they couldn't follow it. So I want to see, maybe, one thing that we mentioned is like those complicated exercises, throw those out. So complicated plays and things like that, hopefully this team will throw those out. One other thing about strength training that teaches you, one thing, this is something I actually just came up with myself. So one thing about strength training is it's going to teach you discipline. And I'm hoping that Ben Herbert has a big impact in that area, discipline. And he also went on to state, if you follow the coach's direction, in turn, he's going to trust you and put you on the field. So our question, is this why Brandon Staley wouldn't put Isaiah Spiller and Deion Henley on the field? Because he didn't feel like they could follow directions, where a guy who didn't seem to be very talented after he got shook by Rex Grossman taken to the house for the Texans, Is this why he put Amin Agbangbamiga on the field, but wouldn't put Deion Henley on the field when Deion Henley is supposedly much more talented? So I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. And then one thing that he said at the end was glutes and hip extension is important to explosion. So he didn't really mention, I don't think he mentioned much about explosion in the Chargers interview, press conference, but I'm thinking that they're going to be doing stuff like that. They're going to try to, well, he did say that they were trying to improve things like top speed and acceleration. So they're definitely going to be working on that. How he's going to do it, I don't know. He didn't really go into it, but it's probably something similar. And then one thing that he tries to do is make it fun. You know, from music to competition. He's not trying to be a hard ass. He's also not trying to be boys with the players. He's just basically trying to build that trust so they know that they can rely on him. But anyway, I'm really excited about Ben Herbert. I'm so glad that I got to see both of those presentations by him, the interview and the presentation. Oh, and you know, I definitely skipped something. Skipped the fueling the body part. Let me go back to that. So, and this is a big thing with the Chargers because the Chargers, you remember a few years ago, they were clowning the Chargers for having some of the worst food in the league. And now they're being catered by Wolfgang Puck's company. Hopefully they're really good. But so, and this is, I actually touched on this earlier when I was talking about the DEXA scan. So, like me, I'm a naturally big dude. I'm like built like a running back, right? So I have like really dense bones. I do not float. I sink. I've fallen 2 stories and not even gotten hurt. So basically meaning that like I'm basically a big dude, right? So one thing I wanted to do was try to lose some weight. And I was getting extremely, extremely frustrated because for 2 months or so, I'm sitting up here counting calories, following a high protein diet, getting like 240 grams of protein, and I'm not losing any weight. But one thing that is happening is my face is getting chiseled and my pants are fitting better. So I sat up here and only lost 3 pounds, but it was 7 pounds of muscle. 7 pounds of fat that I lost, and 4 pounds of muscle that I put on. And how I did that was making sure that I was eating the proper diet, the proper amount of carbs, fats, and protein, and making sure I was super hydrated. And this is one of the foundations of Herbert's program. So he was saying that you can train like a beast if you want to, but if you're not putting the food in, he didn't say anything about rest, but I'm pretty sure that's probably part of his program too. But if you're not fueling the body regularly and hydrating regularly, then you're not going to maximize your training. So he says what they eat and how they hydrate is important. The foundation of development is how guys fuel their body. So he's saying from a food and fluid standpoint, guys can train like a beast once they adapt to the stimulus, and they always change the stimulus. If they don't frequently fuel their body with nutrient-dense food and hydrate, they will never reap the rewards of all that hard training. He said that the body's preferred fuel source is low glycemic carb. So low glycemic index carb. I didn't put that in right. And so it means carbs with low sugar. And he says a lot of the players or a lot of the athletes find it hard to comprehend the nutrition part. For example, if you take a great wide receiver like Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, this guy is still saying that nutrition doesn't matter. And Shannon Sharp is trying to say, you know, if you would taken your nutrition seriously, you would have played longer in the league. And Chad just doesn't agree with that. And one thing about Chad is he does a lot of sprinting, so he can pretty much eat whatever he wants. He's going to be built solid like a sprinter. But that doesn't mean that he maximizes his ability. One of the most talented receivers you ever saw in your life. And he doesn't comprehend the nutrition part. He says that athletes find it hard to comprehend the nutrition part. They'll train all day, just don't comprehend the nutrition part. So what he did at college, which they'll probably do with the Chargers, I would assume there's no reason not to do this. He set up a system to make it easy for the athletes to grab nutrition and go based on what the athlete prefers. So they want to fuel the pre-workout and then protein and fuel for the post-workout. So, they'll probably have some sort of a system where the players can just grab the pre-workout meal. And then once they're done, they'll have the post-workout meal ready for them, either like a shake, or I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're probably going to have that all set up. And then they'll probably have staff to make sure that the whatever the bottle or whatever the system, they'll make sure that the staff takes care of making it efficient, whether they're on the road or they're at home. And now I don't know if they're going to do this with these professional athletes, but they might. So in college, he would take players grocery shopping, and he understands one thing: when the player's hungry, they want to eat now. So one of the keys is to give the player the information in a way that they're going to understand it. So they'll first of all start out with, what does the player like? And then that's how they'll go. That's how they'll give the information to the player based on what they like. Now, if they like the wrong things, they'll find out if the players tried different things. For example, if the player likes mayonnaise, right? That's no good for you. It's not nutrient dense. So they'll ask the player, have you tried avocado, and see if they're willing to try it. 90% of the time, the players love it. But it all comes down to whether or not the food is nutrient dense or not. And that's exactly what I was doing when I lost all that fat and gained that muscle in 1 month as an old dude. So he wants to make sure that they make things easy. So they went over things like meal prep with the player if they want to eat at home. So they'll teach them how to prepare like things like chicken or fish. A lot of them don't know how to cook that. They'll teach them how to prepare it, teach them how to do meal prep. I would hope that a professional player would just pay somebody to prep those meals for them, so they don't have to even think about that. And they said that they want to have their players do carbs early in the day and start to minimize carbs in the evening. You definitely need carbs, especially the low glycemic index carbohydrates. And let's see. So for hydration, there's they'd either have the players have a 1 gallon jug of water, or they tell them to invest in a hydro flask, which is a little under a gallon. It's an aluminum container. It keeps cold and hot's hot. And it's something that doesn't have to be replaced every few days due to bacteria buildup. Like if you ever had a plastic container, that bacteria is a beast. Now, one thing that guys just don't get is the changes. A lot of times, if you're not actually looking, you see yourself every day, you don't notice the changes. So he makes sure that he takes pictures before and then shows them the after so they can see how they developed. One of the players that he developed at Arkansas was Hunter Henry, best tight end in college football at the time. And he went on to show some pictures before and after of Henry. And you could tell that, Henry went from being pretty good to an absolute beast. But anyway, that's about it. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And but there's a little bit more here, I guess. I kind of skipped over most of this. So one thing that you saw earlier, or that I said earlier, is that they either want to decrease fat and increase lean muscle mass if it's needed or not. So one thing he wants to do is he wants to see if a player has a body composition issue, see if their fat is causing an issue or not. He looks at body composition, like I said. He doesn't look at weight room numbers. And see the quality of movements. Okay, we went through this. So that's about it. So yeah, I'm very excited about Ben Herbert. I was getting really excited during his Chargers press conference. It made me want to run through a brick wall. So I'm really, really excited to see what kind of an effect and what change he makes to this team. He might, without changing anything else, this one addition that we've made to this team might give us a few more wins, just him being there. So bolts up, and please subscribe if you enjoy the content. I'll talk to you guys later.